years ago realized that this was not about kids, that we adults can't always get along and we don't always agree. And interestingly, in autism, and it seems to be somewhat unique in autism, that everybody has an opinion about how kids with autism should be educated, and those opinions range from one end of the country to the other. And so I found that we needed some mantras, some guiding principles, if you will, things that we have to come back to and say, okay, this is on the table, does this align with our principles? And the first, because everybody has those opinions and you don't get anywhere, and you may have seen this, I think I played it at the board meeting as well, but it often feels, when I go into meetings, it often feels like I'm attempting to herd cats, because everybody's at war about what should be done, and there's zero agreement. So this is what it looks like when people are not getting along.
He's the first cat herder in our family.
Herding cats. Don't let anybody tell you it's easy. Anybody can herd cattle. Holding together 10,000 half-wild short hairs, that's another thing altogether.
Being a cat herder is probably about the toughest thing I think I've ever done.
I got this one this morning, right here, and if you look at his face, it's just ripped to shreds, you know?
You see the movies, you hear the stories, I'm living a dream. Not everyone can do what we do.
I wouldn't do nothing else.
It ain't an easy job, but when you bring a herd into town and you ain't lost a one of them, ain't a feeling like it in the world.
So herding cats, that's pretty much my job when I get together with adults, because us adults are all in separate wings about what should be done. So this is our first guiding principle, and in the meetings I'm at, when someone throws something on the table, I'm going to come back and say, tell me what law, research, or data you're using to make that decision, because we do not have time anymore for opinion debates. So opinions are over. We're done with opinions. Everything we do around educating kids with autism has got to be guided by what does the law say about educating kids with autism, which is what we're going to talk about tomorrow in the IEP module. What does the law say about educating kids with disabilities and certainly kids with autism? The second one is, what does the research say? What does the literature say about effective practices? We in schools are obligated by law to implement evidence-based practices. Those of you implementing at home, we obviously know that if the strategies have been shown to be effective in school environments, they're likely to be effective in home environments. So how do we coordinate and collaborate what we are doing in schools to ensure that there's better learning across all environments? So that's really, I'm kind of going to walk you through what we do or what should be happening in schools for your kids and grandkids, et cetera, but also talk about then how do you marry that or how do you implement that in the home environment if you're not already. And then what does our data say? Just because something is evidence-based doesn't mean it's going to work for your child or your grandchild. It really has to be what data, we have to be collecting data over time to show that that particular practice or whatever is effective. So I thought I'd give you some resources and some references about what is out there. This is no longer a problem with knowing what to do. We know how to get the best outcomes for kids on the autism spectrum. The research has been done. It continues to be done, but we have a solid base of what strategies we should be using to ensure the best outcomes. And so I don't know how many of you have seen this, but in our project, in the START project, we had the opportunity for a number of years to work with the National Professional Development Center on Autism Spectrum Disorders. And this was a national grant. Our particular university was the University of California at Davis. And so we worked collaboratively with them for 3 years to look at implementing evidence-based practices in schools for kids with autism. And these are, and essentially what they did, and it's that concept that, you know, humans are very vulnerable to believing inaccurate information. We're very vulnerable to anecdotal stories. So if you Google autism therapy right now, anybody done it recently? Autism therapy? Comes up like 16 billion hits, right? And everybody's supposedly done some research and this has shown to be effective and all of that. And so how do you weed through what really is true and what is somebody trying to sell a product and make a buck off of autism? And so what the National Professional Development Center did is they established a standard, because what you don't want to happen is somebody who has a vested interest, like money, to do research on their own strategy, publish it and package it under their own company, and then sell it to you as a bill of goods. and it happens all the time, and because autism, the frequency of autism has come up, it's out of control in terms of the number of therapies and strategies and whatever that are out there for autism that have less than zero empirical support. And so what they did is they went and reviewed the literature, they set a standard, and they said the research has to be done by this many different people, in this many different environments, published in this many different journals before it can be established as evidence-based. And so what they have identified right now are 24 evidence-based practices that work for children with autism. And so if it's shaded in green, it means that the research has been done. And again, the other thing that they did, which I thought was brilliant, is people are always, you know, they'll say to me, well, we're doing X, Y, or Z, whatever it is, and it's working. So I'm always coming back with, what do you mean by working? And you tell me, if something's working, what's it doing? The questions will get a little bit more difficult as we move forward to the end of the 2 hours. Well, what do you mean when you say it's working?
Seeing improvement.
Improvement in what?
In whatever areas you're focused on.
You would think. I would hope that would be the case, but oftentimes, if we get the absence of behavior, we feel it's working. The absence of behavior becomes the goal, and that's another one of our mantras is the absence of behavior is not a goal. If something is working, we better be very specific about what it's working to do. Is it improving communication skills? Is it improving independence skills? Is it improving socialization and initiation skills? What specific skills is this, what we're using, working for? Because we can stop behavior, but none of those things are going to result in improved outcomes because we don't have skill acquisition. When you start talking about some of the diets and some of the vitamins and some of the whatever, kind of makes sense. And yet when you look at the literature, controlled research studies where they've controlled for enough of the variables that could have resulted in that outcome, and then looked at whether that particular thing made the difference, most of that stuff does not stand up under scrutiny. Period. And the way I look at it, and I'm very respectful of families choosing what they want, but I think families should make informed decisions. And the problem is sometimes who's feeding you information have a vested interest in whether or not you use that therapy. And so it's about, here's a place to go where you can go in, and at least if you're going to use that therapy, you are making an informed decision about the outcomes and the potential side effects of some of these treatments that are being used. So I just want to show you, scroll down, and show you one in the educational thing, facilitated communication. Are people familiar with that? Different than functional communication, and people mix this up. Functional communication systems are systems for kids who are not verbal and need augmentative systems to communicate. And functional communication systems involve using prompting in order to teach the student to effectively use their communication system. Okay, so guiding principle 1, all opinions informed by the law, the research, the data. Guiding principle number 2 is a primary goal for students with autism has got to be socialization, skill development, independent skills. We're learning this the hard way because now we're working in secondary transition with young adults who have autism. And whether they're on the end of the spectrum that is more Asperger or more involved in their autism, the fact of the matter is that academics sometimes is overplayed. And herein lies the issue. For kids with Asperger syndrome, oftentimes they're really good at the academics. And so we're so proud of how great they're doing in the academics that we forego the social skills and the independent skills. On the other end of the spectrum, you've got kids who are more involved in their autism, for which it's like, well, you know, the academics aren't going to matter that much to him, so we're going to work on matching and, you know, all this other stuff that, again, foregoing the social skill development and the independent skills. I've gone into so many classrooms where kids with autism were so verbally prompt dependent that they wouldn't eat without someone saying, pick up the spoon, put it in the bowl, take a bite. Kids with autism are incredibly susceptible to verbal prompts. Tony Adler talks about the little girl, kindergarten girl, who Dad brought her every day to school, and they had one of those letter rugs in the room. At the end of the day, every day, she would do this little hoppity thing, all over this little letter carpet. And of course, they're all like, oh, isn't that cute? She has autism, and it's a little, self-stimulatory routine she does at the end of the day. Until someone started to pay attention to the letter she was jumping on. Meanwhile, everyone's saying, we're going to have to hold her back. She doesn't have pre-literacy skills. She doesn't know her letters. She doesn't know, et cetera. And so someone pays attention, and every day, GOODBYEFRIENDS. Really hard to say that she doesn't know her letters, right? And so we have to get creative about, they're going to show you on their own time, in their own place, in their own way. And we're going to have to, as educators, accept that. As parents, accept that he obviously knows it. We had the one kid, he was at middle school, and he was in a center-based program because they're like, he knows no academics. I mean, the academics, he's like at the pre-kindergarten level in his academics. And so mom calls up the school. This is the school saying this, he's really low in his academics. And so mom calls up the one day and she goes, I just have a question for you. She goes, if he does not know any of his literacy skills, he can't read, can't do math, can't whatever, how in the world did he go into my purse, get my credit card, go on Amazon.com, order up all of his favorite ninja stuff, and I had no idea until boxes of ninja stuff are showing up at the door. That's autism.